Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and a couple weeks ago, Mike Alewitz was on the show talking about his experiences as an eyewitness student activist during the Kent State Massacre 44 years ago. But Mike is still doing a whole lot of interesting things now, and he describes himself as an artist, activist, and educator. So we're going to talk about those things tonight. So welcome back, Mike.
Thank you.
I guess maybe you can start talking about how you became involved in art and more specifically in public art.
Well, as you know, I was an anti-Vietnam War activist, and that was going through the experience of the anti-war movement, which I was involved in centrally for years, and was a leader of the National Student Strike in 1970. And I had become a socialist really my last year of high school and first year of college, and I was a Marxist, and that's been a lifelong avocation of mine. So I became active in the labor movement. I was active in different union struggles, different social justice struggles. Like many people of my generation who got involved in the anti-war movement, we became involved in a lot of other things as well. I was involved in the labor movement as a worker, not as an official or a full-time person of any sort. I worked on the railroad for a number of years. I worked as a machinist. I worked doing different things. And in the process, I picked up the old drifter's trade of being a sign painter, you know, like Woody Guthrie and Debs and a lot of other people. I learned how to hand letter and made a living as a sign painter and then a billboard painter. So while I was involved in industrial unions, I also had my little side gig kind of doing some activities. And later in life, went back to school. I was working as a third shift machinist at General Electric up in Lynn, Massachusetts, and went back to Massachusetts College of Art. And I had worked as a billboard painter, and I wanted to learn how to paint murals, but I ended up teaching the course because, in fact, it was mural painters who knew how to paint murals. And in fact, it was surprising to me then, and still surprising to this day, that of the thousands of art schools and very fine painters around the country, really it's a lost craft, and the only place that it's really taught that I know of is at Central Connecticut State University, where the old mural painting skills, which really were embodied by the billboard painters and scenic artists, in theater are taught. So it was a logical step for my political activities to begin painting political murals. And that first happened in Nicaragua with the Nicaraguan Revolution. I went to Nicaragua, I made several trips, and began to paint murals in Nicaragua. When the Somoza dictatorship, when the US-backed dictatorship was overthrown, a lot of artists went there, and to participate in this new experiment, in this new social experiment, this revolution that was going on. And also, and most importantly for me, to experience so we could come back and relate that experience and bring it to working people and peace activists in this country. And so my first mural was actually painted in Nicaragua.
Now you say on your Facebook page and your website that you might be the most censored artist in the world. Why do you think that is? Well,
as far as I know, I am the most censored artist in the world. Now, there may be somebody out there who's got me beat, but I'm unaware of who it might be. And I have a book of my work called Insurgent Images, the Agitprop Murals of Mike Alewitz, which Paul Buell wrote, and you can get it on Amazon. And it's a book, it's a colored book of all the murals, and virtually all of them are gone. For example, the murals in Nicaragua were all mostly destroyed when the Chamorro government came back into power after the overthrow of the Sandinistas. Then I've had murals destroyed by union bureaucrats. I've had them destroyed by so-called socialist organizations. I've had them censored by the AFL-CIO. You know, just a lot of people have destroyed these works. And really what it's about more than anything is when you work in the gallery system, if you're an artist and you paint easel paintings in a gallery system, things that are commodities that can be bought and sold and kept safely within this sheltered environment, you're pretty free to do whatever you want. I mean, there are famous cases where some artist gets censored in a gallery and it becomes a big cause célèbre and usually advances that artist's career, actually. But when you paint for workers and as part of a working class struggle, then you don't get that response. The fact of the matter is, if you paint a mural with striking meat packers, or you paint a mural with revolutionaries in Nicaragua, or you paint, you know, with miners who are engaged in a struggle, then the art world turns its back on you. You're not considered part of the art world. You know, my projects, for example, I have boxes and boxes of press clippings. There are usually a lot of press coverage around my projects, my murals. They get a lot of attention. And then, but in the art press, you won't find 1 inch. You will not find a mention. You will not find the name Alewitz in Art in America or any other art magazine. It's not that there's the animosity necessarily, it's just if you paint things about working people, you're not considered part of the art world.
And a lot of your paintings are in the public, on public walls,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, the public walls, whoever is in charge in the government, has a lot of power over what's on those walls.
Well, there's a war that goes on every night all across the world over who's going to own the walls. You know, the authorities of every country are very much against graffiti and street art, and which is really a reincarnation of mural painting. That's all it is. It's painting murals on walls. And there's literally a war that's going on over these wars because my work is censored and destroyed because of its politics. But the animosity directed towards public art goes beyond that. You don't have to do political work to get censored. You don't have to do political imagery to be considered an enemy of the state and an enemy of society. The vitriolic response to graffiti in this country is a perfect example. You're considered a criminal if you paint murals in this country, and you're considered a vandal. And really what it is it's the reaction of the authorities against any form of cultural expression that genuinely comes from the heart of the working class. Because that's who makes graffiti and street art. It's mostly young workers who do this. And in their vibrant colors, in their spray can art, in the things that they splatter on the walls, is embodied, really, this expression of the hopes and aspirations of working people. And in every country, in every city of every country around the world, every night, there are young people who go forth with spray cans engaged in a kind of class war. And you can Google street art in any part of the world and stuff will come up and you'll see fabulous things. And yet, it's not considered really part of the art world. Now they're trying to co-opt it now, but really it's criminalized in most places and very much frowned upon.
Now, do you ever find any of these young people in your mural classes?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had New Britain, interestingly enough, and I didn't know it when I went there. We started our program there 14 years ago. But New Britain actually had some world-class graffiti artists. Some of them were Polish young people. And when we went to paint a mural in Europe, they were known. They're in some of the big graffiti books and stuff. Very fine artists. And we've had events, mural slams, one-day mural slams, where people have come and painted things. So, yeah, so actually in Connecticut there are some world-class graffiti artists, and some of them were in my class. Some were very accomplished artists when they came to the school, because a lot of graffiti artists started in their early teens. And then, you know, we started a course in street art. We have the only street art course in the country at CCSU. And perhaps we've inspired some people to begin to do it. Graffiti, spray can art, is the first kind of visual art form that's been so massive and so indigenous to the American working class. I mean, really, our tradition is much more musical. You know, America's gift to the world. America's brought two things to the world. One is war and destruction, and the other is our music, which is really African American music, but adopted and broadened by a lot of different influences. But you know, our gift to the world is our music, our blues, our jazz, our rock and roll, our hip hop, our rap, our all these, you know. And now, when graffiti started, very much involved with hip hop, that was the first kind of similar occurrence that was visual. And so it's been very exciting for people like me to watch street art go from becoming just wild style lettering to this explosion of art. And especially when you see in Tahrir Square, suddenly there's people doing graffiti and street art and performance and, you know, all these kind of things. So it's the largest visual art movement in human history, and a lot of it is about mural painting.
Well, I think maybe we can look at one of your murals.
Sure.
And I think it might be on the screen on one of the cameras. Do you want to talk about this P9 mural?
Sure. Well, this was the first mural I did in the United States. After I returned from Nicaragua, when I went to Nicaragua, it was very exciting. There was a social transformation, and one of the rewards of a revolution is culture. In places like Nicaragua and Cuba, where it's very poor countries and they make a revolution, well, you're not going to, you're suddenly not going to be eating steak. You're still going to be eating rice and beans. Well, for the first time, you might be eating rice and beans every day. But one of the big rewards is culture. It's music, it's poetry, it's all these things that you're allowed to participate. Because most workers are discouraged from participating in cultural activities. Even in, you know, advanced capitalist countries like the United States, most people don't get to participate in art, and they're discouraged at it from a very early age. When I got back from Nicaragua was when the P9 strike was taking place in 1985 and 86. And this was a very militant strike by packing house workers in Austin, Minnesota. And it was the first strike that galvanized a real national opposition to concession contracts. And the company was very profitable. The Hormel Meat Packing Company was very profitable, but they wanted more profits. So they were cutting back and cutting back. Finally, the workers had enough. They went on strike. And they wore these blue silk jackets, and they started to invent their own culture during the course of the strike. And I, like a lot of other people, went out there for a rally. And as I helped them paint signs. You know, my union local made a small donation, and we helped paint these big banners for some rallies and stuff they were having. And as I left, I said, "Hey, we should paint a mural on the side of your building there. This would be a good spot." And you know, most unions don't do things like that anymore. They used to do them during the 1930s and everything, but you don't see the need to do them unless you're engaged in activity. Now these workers suddenly were engaged in activity, suddenly were taking on the cops and the National Guard and the company, and they were all excited and they wanted to do something. So, sure, let's paint a mural. So I stayed, we painted a mural on the side of the building.
And here,
this is part of it. This is one of the central images of the mural, and it was painted by the workers mostly themselves, and this symbol was put on T-shirts and became kind of a symbol for the strike, and it shows a woman meat packer with the P9 a two-handed meat cleaver hacking off the head of the monster that's strangling the city, and the eyes of the monster are the Hormel logo. And it's actually based on an image from the early years of the Russian Revolution that we took. And it was an amazing thing, and it says, you see, it says, abolish apartheid. This was dedicated to Nelson Mandela. Now, that doesn't seem like much today, because today everything is dedicated to Nelson Mandela, and he's been rehabilitated. But dedicating this mural back then, when the U.S. was still vilifying Mandela as a terrorist and a violent man, this would be like, you know, dedicating it to Gaddafi or some other, you know, figure that you're supposed to hate. And so it was a very brave thing that these workers were doing, because they'd become so radicalized in the course of their strike. And it was a wonderful project. And unfortunately, and
we do have a picture of...
There's the dedication ceremony, yes. And there's the mural, and it has a banner, and today marks the anniversary of this dedication, actually. And across the sky is a banner that says, "If blood be the price of your cursed wealth, good God, we have paid in full." And we picked that slogan. It's from an old IWW poem, because the work that these people do, meat packers stand in blood knee-deep all day long, doing the most horrible, dehumanizing, difficult, dangerous work in order to feed us. And like most workers who feed us and who clothe us, their work is denigrated and they're considered to be unimportant. And the workers in the plant had injury rates of 100, 200%. You knew you were going to get hurt. You knew you were going to lose fingers. You knew you were going to slice. And it's brutal work that's, even under the best of circumstances, is incredibly heroic. And when it's being cut back, and the wages whittled away, and wages whittled away, and concessions being forced, it just becomes much worse. So what these workers did was very great and very brave. And in the process, they found an enemy as remorseless as the Hormel Company, unfortunately, in the leadership of their own union, the International Officers of the United Food and Commercial Workers, who turned on the strike, basically sabotaged it, and sandblasted that mural off the wall. And the way they...
Oh, it wasn't Hormel that destroyed it.
No, this was the union, the Fat Cat union officials themselves. And the way they did it was is very illustrative of how some of these big union officials feel towards their own members. No one in the town would do the work. No one in the town would do the job. No one would sandblast this thing off the wall. The workers went to jail defending this artwork. Since they couldn't get it, they took off their three-piece suits and they went out and they did it themselves. And you'd think they would start in the upper left-hand corner and they'd sandblast it off the wall, but that's not what they did. First, they sandblasted the faces off the workers. Then, they sandblasted the slogans, like the anti-apartheid slogans, off the banners. Then they did it, the rest of the mural. And it just reveals how far removed some of these wealthy union officials are from the ranks of their members.
Well, you mentioned IWW, but the union movement in the United States has taken a very different direction.
Yeah, yes. Well, the thing is that, you know, we have an incredible militant history in the labor movement in this country. I mean, our militancy is celebrated throughout the world. May Day, the international holiday of the working class, is a celebration of the fight for the 8-hour day in Chicago and the frame up of the Haymarket martyrs. And when you go in any country of the world, May 1st, nobody works. They put their tools down. But in this country, people don't even know their own history because we've been robbed of our history. And we have a very, very militant history in the labor movement, but it's largely been lost. It's one of the things we have to relearn. And the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, was a big part of that. And they had a rich culture, and it was a mass organization. Hundreds of thousands of workers considered themselves to be Wobblies, and they transformed this country. The reason we can speak here today, the reason we can speak on street corners, the reason we can hold meetings is because of the free speech fights of the IWW. And, you know, and one of the things that I often paint into my murals, and when you look at the images of my murals, you'll see the imagery and the quotes and some of the history from the IWW, because I want people to relearn these things. We have to relearn these things.
I actually think we have short memories for a lot of struggles. You know, you look at the struggle of the suffragettes, for example. It was a very long, harrowing struggle, and yet it's still tough to get people to vote, women to vote.
Well, you know, it's a never-ending struggle. You know, when I started going to Kent in 1968, one of the first things I was involved in was the fight for the Black Studies Department. At that time, there were no Black Studies Department. Things that, you know, we can take for granted today, that you can learn and read about Malcolm X and things like that, really was not true as late as the late 60s and early 70s. There were no women's studies departments to promote the idea of the history of there was no such thing as women's history. That came about because of the women's movement. And without a mass visible women's movement, these things start to be lost again. Just like reproductive rights starts to get lost again. And everything becomes kind of goofy in terms of trying to figure out politics. The only way you can have rational approaches to problem solving in society is when you have mass mobilizations of working people in their various forms in order to provide a way forward, because that's how you know what to do. When it comes to questions of images of women or how women are treated in society and all these kind of things, the only way you can have a rational approach to it is when you have a real women's movement with people marching and defending the rights of women and all those sorts of things. And, you know, it'll come back again. You know, these things come and go. We're not on the planet very long, so it seems like they're gone for a long time, but in reality, they come and go pretty quickly.
Now, I have here actually quite a few other murals that you created and are no more. So I'm going to go through them, and whichever ones you think have a backstory that's really worth sharing.
There's a thousand
stories. The Naked City.
Yes, there are many stories to these things. Any one of these.
So they're in kind of a random order. So.
Well, you know, the thing about all of these, there is a huge story because my work is about the stories of working people. And the image in some ways is the least important part of it. It's like the P9 mural. Really the important thing was the P9 strike and what these workers did and how they galvanized the national movement stuff. And, you know, and I'm very, you know, I felt very honored to be able to contribute to that by helping them to create this mural. And when I teach, I explain to my students that this is what you can do with your art. It can be so meaningful to the world. But really, it was their story. And because their story is so rich, that's why you can spend an hour talking about it. Whereas some easel painter who did a mural, did a painting about, well, this is how I felt last night, or, you know, maybe you can't, maybe there's not that much to it.
Although I have to say, even that kind of painting, there's something about painting that does, I don't know, transmit a message. And the example is, you know, a few years ago when we in New London were trying to keep Riverside Park from being sold, one thing we did was invite landscape artists to come and paint it, and we exhibited their paintings in the train station for a month. And that really helped shift a lot of people's perception of what the space was, because, you know, the artists brought their own eyes to it. And so it wasn't political art, or I don't think any of the artists considered themselves political painters. They were, for the most part, landscape painters, and yet it had a real function in a struggle we were in.
Well, it shows we're human beings.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and very elemental. You know, mural painting, the first paintings that human beings did was a hand against the wall in a cave spitting berry juice on it. In other words, an airbrushed mural. And right, putting your identity onto the wall. And a graffiti artist today who writes their name is doing exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And this is part of the reason that bosses and bureaucrats fear art. It's because you're asserting yourself as a human being. You're saying, hey, I'm a human being. I'm not just a cog in your machine. I'm not just somebody that goes into the cubicle and follows orders. I also take color, and I see, and you know, and I do these things, and it's a very human activity. And that's why it's dangerous. That's why it's considered to be a dangerous thing. And there's a backstory to this. This is the Pathfinder mural, which was destroyed by, I was a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, which was a very proud history of struggle for many years, and like many political organizations, became something else and became kind of a weird cult, which I haven't been associated in for many, many years. But this was a 6-story building in Manhattan, and artists came from all over the world to paint revolutionary figures coming off the printing press here. And it was a glorious project, and in the process of it, unfortunately, I failed to adequately appreciate what some of the upper officials wanted to see happen, and I was thrown out of the group, and they began to really mutilate the thing and took out personal things and funny things and stuff like that. It became something very different. And it was very sad, and eventually it was taken off the wall.
Well, once again, I guess one of the problems with art is it's the artist's message, and anyone who wants to control the message isn't going to want all these individual messages.
It's a struggle. Really, the artist struggles every day. Even whether you're, you know, a didactic political artist like me, you know, I do what's called agitprop art. That's a combination of the words agitation and propaganda. My work is very utilitarian. It's meant to be used in strikes and struggles and to publicize events and things like that. And it's not for everybody. It just happens to be what I do. Other people may be doing more very personal things, you know, and artists have to go wherever their artistic hearts take them. And even if you're a political person, you may not make political art. Maybe you do personal things that are very abstract. That's fine as long as you make good art. You know, but it's all every artist, I think, who's really serious about their art. It's a daily struggle to find meaning in your work. And that's why artists have always been aligned with revolutionary and radical movements. You know, there's very few right-wing artists. There are some, because there's always a polarization that goes on in every section of society. But by and large, artists have always identified with revolutionary and progressive causes. Many of them have been revolutionaries. You know, in Nicaragua, for example, which I was just talking about, it was poets. It was poets, you know, leading the revolution. You know, and because you need poetry in a revolution, you need magic. This is our reward, and this is what gives us vision, and this is what allows us to imagine a different world. How can you possibly make a revolution if you can't imagine something better? And this imagining something better, is of course feared by the employers. They don't want workers imagining things better. They want them accepting what exists. You know, that's why, you know, don't draw outside, don't color outside the lines, you know.
Hey, we could, stray into talk about education for that matter, because it is always a balancing act that, you know, how much of education is teaching people how to fit in and how much is teaching them to, helping them to find their creativity and the knowledge they need to do what they need, what they
well, and you see why there is an assault on, you know, the humanities today, and why they're trying to eliminate the arts from universities and stuff, and why it's all about STEM, and why it's all about job training. You know, you go to university gatherings or faculty meetings and stuff, there's no discussion about what's best to learn and make students imagine a better world and become agents of change and do these things. It's all about what's going to get you a job. You know, how are you going to compete better? They want students to compete. What art does is encourages people to be involved in joyous activities together. And that's a very different concept. You know, that's a very different concept. That's what you find in the street on the mass demonstration. We're all doing this together. We're changing things together. Not, I'm going to ice you out. I'm going to be better than this so I can get a job. You won't get one, but that's all right. I'll get one. You know, that kind of, that's what employers love to see, competition. You know, and unfortunately, of course, you have the whole nature of education is changing, so that's more and more becoming the primary thing, down to the grade school level. You know, what do you need recess for? You should be in there learning how to multiply things, so that you'll grow up to be a dutiful and obedient insurance, working in an insurance cubicle somewhere. You know, and art has a different impetus to it. And it's all about imagining things. It's all about seeing things differently. And that's why when workers become excited and involved, when they go out on strike or they're engaged in a struggle, the first thing they do is turn to art. They start writing songs, they start writing poems, they start making cartoons about the boss, and yeah, they paint murals on the wall. It's a great thing.
Well, it's funny because there have been a lot of documentaries about how music has been a big part of revolutions, and not so much about visual arts.
No, and well, part of it is in those places where it's been, you know, art follows its own direction. And, you know, for example, in Mexico, murals were a big part of the social transformations that occurred in the Mexican Revolution. I mean, actually after the Mexican Revolution, but it gave visual expression to that. In many ways, the murals in Mexico gave expression to the Russian Revolution, because all those artists had gone to Russia and were very influenced by that, and they came back and they painted these murals. And radical artists in the United States in the 1930s looked at the Mexicans, and they kind of copied them too, but it wasn't an indigenous tradition, so they weren't as nearly as good. I mean, there's some good murals, but really nothing that compares to the Mexican murals. Art follows its own way, and you're absolutely right. Our artistry in relation to movements has been primarily music, you know, and you know, in many ways, in direct political folk singing, that kind of thing, the Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger thing, but also, you know, John Coltrane was very much an expression of the Black nationalist movement, you know, and so there are always these connections, but art follows its own directions, and it doesn't always go the same way politics does, you know.
Which is one of the reasons, I'm guessing, that it gets censored.
Yes.
So let's take a look at a couple of the murals.
Well, this is a piece that I painted. A lot of my work's been international. This was at the Rachel Corrie Peace Center, and this was painted in the Arab village of Anada a few years ago. This has been destroyed again. This was destroyed by the Israeli army. Off in the distance in the back is an Israeli interrogation center, and torture is legal in Israel. They legally torture Palestinians in that place. This was painted, had a lot of, there were a lot of reasons for it. One of them is, and the reason that it looks like you're looking through a hole in the wall, was it was a statement against the walls that are being built around the Palestinians. And the other thing it shows is the bulldozer made in the USA, and the figures of Rachel Corrie and a Palestinian woman named Nuha. Rachel Corrie was a young artist and peace activist from from Washington State, from Evergreen State College, who went to, who was in the Mideast to oppose the housing demolitions, and she was basically assassinated by the Israeli Defense Forces. And I painted this mural on the side of the Rachel Corrie Peace Center, and it's been rebuilt 5 times. It's now being rebuilt again because they keep knocking it down.
And there are groups that are working to rebuild,
yes.
but they can't keep up with it.
Well, it's the whole history of Israel is an expansionist colonial settler state, and it's become larger and larger and larger, and they've pushed the Palestinians out and pushed the Palestinians out. It's one of the great historical crimes of our time. And however, the Palestinian people are a amazing, heroic inspiration to people all over the world. They continue to struggle for their homeland. They continue to struggle for the right to return. And I believe that eventually, unless the capitalists have created a situation where they've literally destroyed our planet for good, one day we will triumph, because you can't defeat a people who are united. It's never been done, and it never will be done.
And you know, I've looked at the maps that B'Tselem, which is an Israeli peace group, have used to document the intrusions into West Bank especially, and it's pretty shocking.
Yeah, well, Israel is very similar to South Africa in how it was set up and structured. And what they're doing today is creating Bantustans, basically. And, you know, Israel was set up as a tool for the United States and England and France and the other Western powers in order to keep the Arab people divided. That's the role that's played. It's basically a big military base in a lot of ways. You know, and it's been used to suppress all the indigenous revolts and revolutionary struggles that have taken place. When the Jordanian people rose up, the Israelis crushed it. When even as far away as going to the Congo, you know, you know, but you know, and when I was a kid growing up Jewish, you know, you were fed all this crap about Zionism and trying to equate Zionism with being Jewish, which it's not. It's a political ideology. Most of the Jews who were forced to go to Israel in the first place were not Zionists. They were socialists and communists and anarchists and radicals.
You know, I lived in Israel, and I was a practicing socialist there. And then I left in 1974 because you could just see how, I don't know, how it was, things were going to happen down the road.
Yeah. Well, it carries with it all of the chauvinism and the racism directed against Arabs that you would expect. And when you have a privileged group of people, when you have second-class citizens, and now, for the second time in history, building walls around people, and now it's the Jews building walls around others. It's one of the great ironies of all of this.
Yeah, could be a whole show about that,
yes.
About what the wall really looks like, and I think most Americans don't know that on one side it looks like a wall, but on the other side it's much more complex than that. But let's...
Yeah, there's plenty more censored works to talk about.
Many more censored works to talk about.
Well, this was a series of murals. Some got censored. The one down the bottom, the dreams of, where it says "Dreams of Harriet Tubman," this is actually the sketch for a mural that was supposed to go on a wall at the Black Charities building in Baltimore. In the year 2000, I was selected as one of 50 Millennium Artists by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, and even the White House Millennium Council somehow slipped in there. I don't know how. And I went down to Baltimore, to Maryland, to do a series of murals about Harriet Tubman, and who was this amazing figure. And of course, we're taught Harriet Tubman was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and she led people out of slavery, you know. And like most great revolutionary figures, they turn her into a soundbite like that. In reality, it was much more complex, and she led armed insurrections on the East Shore of Maryland, and I wanted to paint her as she really was. And so I designed this mural, and it was rejected, and the reason it was rejected, the excuse that was used, is because she had a gun in her hand. Now, you're walking around in Baltimore, and there's a monument on every corner with white guys holding guns. And to my knowledge, there isn't a single mural in the country that has a black woman holding a gun. This would be the first one. And yet it became this huge thing, and it was this huge thing in the press and front page news. There was a comedian called Bitterbrother who did a whole routine about Harriet Tubman getting a gun. I mean, this was like on the news every day. It was a huge thing. I would walk down the street and people would go, "Hey, you're the Harriet Tubman guy. Don't you give up her gun," you know. And what was very revealing about this whole thing was not, first of all, the Black United Charities didn't want to have this on their building. But then we issued appeal, and this went out. This was on the front page of the newspaper, you know. We wanted somebody could have a free mural on their building, you know, by a leading national artist about Harriet Tubman. And not one union, not one school, not one community center, not one anything would let us paint the mural, because they were all afraid of getting their funding cut. And so I never got to paint the mural.
So the ones on top had...
The ones on top were painted, and they've since been destroyed also. That was painted in her hometown of Cambridge, Maryland. And I did paint those, but they were later destroyed. They were vandalized, and then the town themselves simply painted them out and replaced it with something else.
I'm sure glad you took a lot of pictures.
Well, I've learned to take pictures, because when the first piece I did that was ever destroyed was when I was a graduate student at Massachusetts College of Art, and I painted a little piece about the police murder of a young black man named Elijah Pate. And I had just completed it, and I had left, I think, to get a sandwich or something. I came back in, and the police were there destroying it. They were writing all over it with magic markers and everything. And then the president of the college painted it out. And I didn't even have time to get a picture of it. So I learned after that, the moment I'm done, take a picture.
Photographic record, because it might be all we end up looking at.
Exactly.
This you can't really see, but I thought it had a little bit of an interesting story.
Oh, yes.
So I wanted to include it.
Well, this was after the P9 strike. One of the main strikes I worked on was the miners' strike against the Pittston Coal Company. And following that, which was actually won, and it was one of the few victories for unions in the last few decades, really. And it was a very important struggle, and the miners are very militant. Without getting into it too much, I painted this mural on the 100th anniversary of the United Mine Workers Union, which was the heart and soul in many ways of the labor movement in this country. The miners were always the most militant. It was the existence of the militant mine workers unions that allowed for the growth and development of the Congress of Industrial Organizations, major industrial unions in this country. So I painted this, and it's 100 feet long. I had to paint, and it's a portable piece. It's on canvas. I had to paint it like a Torah. You know, you paint, you roll it, and you paint it, and you roll it. And it's got John L. Lewis and Mother Jones there in the middle, and it's got little vignettes from the history of the Mine Workers Union. And by the way, people can go to my Facebook page for Mike Alewitz and look at all of these different murals and things. I use it like a website, and you're all invited to go look at these things. And that hung up for one day at the Mine Workers Convention, and that was it. Boom. And the reason I had painted it, so, you know, even though it wasn't officially destroyed, in essence it was destroyed because they rolled it up and they put it away and they never let people see it. I had painted it on the assumption and on the agreement that it would tour the country and that the miners themselves would get a chance to appreciate the work.
But once again, the higher-ups in the union,
and it was Richard Trumka, Richard Trumka, who, you know, one thing about these union officials, you got to realize these union officials have little to do with the ranks. Those of us who are genuine trade union supporters and militants live very different lifestyles than the top union officials, who are often millionaires. They're millionaires, and they live the life of millionaires, and they view their job as make deals, you know, and they kind of like the union because that's who they feed off of, but in reality they're going to make a deal. And Trumka, of course, has been one of the worst.
Oh, let's see what else.
Well, this is another one that was destroyed. and that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of these are
well, if you go back,
okay.
You go back to Malcolm X. Do we have time?
Not really, but
okay.
we'll go through it real fast.
All right. Well, this was painted in Northern Ireland. This is in Belfast, in the Ardoyne section during the height of the Troubles, when the Catholic school children were being met by these racist Protestant mobs throwing crap at them, literally throwing crap at them, and all this stuff. And I went and painted this mural in solidarity, and it was actually, I was invited in part by Sinn Féin, which is the political wing of the Irish movement. But the way that we had to do these, and the way my projects work, both here and in the Middle East and in Northern Ireland, is in reality, Sinn Féin didn't want me to come and paint a militant mural about Malcolm X because I was advocating internationalism. And so when I left, they destroyed it.
Wow. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, so what I'm going to do is, we also have pictures of murals that were destroyed of students, your students at CCSU.
Yes.
So maybe you can just talk for 2 minutes about what's happening there, and I'll go through the...
Yes, and I can, again, if you go to my Facebook site, there's articles about these things, and you can find out more about them. But yes, there was a little brouhaha in the news this past couple of weeks because the administration at Central Connecticut State University basically, you know, said they were going to destroy 18 murals and did destroy a bunch of them, and they haven't, I think, destroyed all of them yet. But and these images you're seeing are some of the ones that were destroyed. There's over 100 murals on the campus. It's a unique program. It's a labor of love from these students. They're working class kids. They come in on weekends and holidays, and they paint these murals.
And it's really varied work.
Oh, it's gorgeous stuff. And there's this one, for example. This student kept coming into class with proposals for these kind of what he thought were appropriate themes for murals, so social issues of this or that, but he really wasn't a political guy. And then meanwhile, during class, he'd sit there doodling all the time. So finally, we opened up his sketchbook, and we saw this incredibly beautiful doodle art that he does. And he ended up painting it as a mural.
Cool.
And it's fabulous, and it's great work. And we've tried to expand the bounds of what mural painting is. You can see he did it in this little odd space and everything. And these pieces, they're art historical. The students really work very hard on these. And you know, of course, it's student work.
And these have been painted over.
These have been destroyed. This has been destroyed. This is a teacher, a local teacher, who painted this about Icarus falling from the sky. Very beautiful, magical piece of work, destroyed for no reason. This was destroyed. This was actually painted on a piece of seamless canvas fastened to the wall, just in case, this was for the microbiology department, just in case they ever had to remove it for any reason.
They could have just
taken
it off.
Right, they didn't. They painted over it and destroyed it.
Wow.
This is about string theory. Don't ask me to explain it, I can't.
And then we'll end with this.
And this is one of the central pieces that some people had objected to because it does have political imagery. This is a fabulous mural piece, and it shows Leonardo's Heads of Woman, which were very important drawings that he did. And this piece really reflects the upheaval of the Renaissance when these drawings were done, along with the upheaval of what's going on in society today. It's about images of women, and unfortunately, it's also been destroyed.
Now, in the minute that we have left,
Sorry.
What can people do to save the rest of them?
Well, you can send a message to Jack Miller, the president of Central Connecticut State University, asking them to stop the destruction of art.
Do they seem responsive to public outcry?
Well, you never know. They don't report to me. They did at least temporarily halt them, so hopefully they will. I will say this: even if they keep painting them out, it's a losing battle. You know, it's a losing battle. And you know, as Martin Luther King used to say, he was very happy to know people who would rather lose in a fight that would eventually win than win something that would eventually lose. And you can't stop people from making art, and eventually we will win.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Mike, and talking about art. People can go to his Facebook page, and there are tons. We really just scratched the surface, and I'm not kidding.
No, I trust me, I know. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next week.
Feel alright today, I got a new pair of shoes. Gonna do me some traveling, walk away my blues. I'm turning a corner in this life of mine. I feel alright today, yeah, I'm doing fine. Gonna find some good times, no heartaches today. Gonna find some sunshine, chase the clouds away. I got a new way of walking, I'm lighter on my feet. I got a new way of talking, come on and listen to me. Feel alright today, I got a new pair of shoes. Gonna do me some traveling, walk away my blues. I'm turning a corner in this life of mine. Feel alright today, yeah, I'm doing fine. Gonna find some good times, no heartaches today. Gonna find some sunshine, chase the blues away. I got a new way of walking, I'm lighter on my feet. I got a new way of talking, come on and listen to me. Feel alright today, I got a new pair of shoes.